According to my clock here, it's 1931. So we've given an extra minute for those who aren't quite on time. But I think I'll start this meeting of the South Western Wales branch of the OS by welcoming our speaker tonight, Kathryn Pulham from Pulhams Coaches. Some of you may have been with us 7 years ago. I looked the date up, it was the 17th of October 2015, when we, as a branch, along with I think the Midland and the Southeast, came to visit Pulhams, and we had a wonderful presentation there, tour around the depot, which at that time was I think only a couple of years old. And Andy gave us a talk at that point about the history of Pulhams, but also the strategy they had of keeping eggs in lots of different baskets, because you never knew what was around the corner. Little did we know when we were sitting there in 2015 that sort of 5 years later, all those eggs would be thrown out of the basket. But that's really why we were quite interested in having Kathryn come along and talk to us. We've heard the story from some of the bus companies, the directors there, who in some ways got through this slightly unscathed, and they had lots of government money coming their way. But I think we'll find the coaching sector was slightly different, and certainly Kathryn, with a CPT hat on, was vigorously campaigning or hitting her head against a brick wall with the government, I know, for quite a bit of COVID. So I think really, Kathryn, if I hand over to you, we'll do your presentation, and I know that you'd like to take questions at the end and discuss any of the subject matter that might come up. So people are aware we are recording this. So if you don't wish to have your image recorded, please remove yourself from the screen now. Other than that, over to you, Kathryn.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see that so many people have given up their time to attend this evening. I can't pretend to do as good a presentation as Andy, and some of the things that I can't remember what was talked about much back then either. But some of the things that perhaps I talk about this evening might be a slight repeat for some of you, but I also wanted to touch on our history. So as you can see, I'm in the beautiful Cotswolds. I'm in a street in Bourton-on-the-Hill, and if you could just watch the behind me, there's a coach coming behind me, so if you wouldn't mind, that's a brand new Irizar, and I don't want it knocking me over, so just give me a wave if you see it getting any closer, and we'll swap the screen over to something else. So thank you very much for having me. I do appreciate it. Again, I always like to, I'm always very honoured to be able to talk about Pulhams. We're extremely proud of where we've come from, and it's because of that a very, very long history. It's because of that I'm never complacent, always genuinely honoured to present to an audience. Our history and a very strong foundation alongside Andy's vision for the company is the reason that we have a company performing highly in all areas, and that I'm very lucky to be able to present that to you today. So without further ado, this is a presentation shot that I used for some Rotary work I did about a year ago, and I really like this this slide because it really is about coming from our history. Started with the slide in the top right, carrying parcels to the local towns for people, and it sort of brings us right up to date, or it did then. We do have another Irizar now, but the PE21, the first Irizar that came into the fleet in 2021, and inside is Andy, obviously, and then our son Will, who is looking slightly young there. He's certainly matured a little bit since then, albeit only just over a year ago. So that is, we're fifth generation now. We're into the fifth generation with Will in the business. He passed his test in June this year. at 18. And so he is now working for us as a driver. Slightly scary for us as parents, but he's doing extremely well, and he's coping with the hours and the passengers, and quite a lot of young ladies, I think, might be interested in what he's at. So that's nice for him. So okay, let's move on. So today, I'm hoping my slide will work. I'm just going to touch briefly on the history. In fact, none of my slides are very long. I've only got a few of them, 12 in total. And I'm just going to briefly touch on history. I want to talk about our current business structure, where we are at the moment, and the kind of things that we've achieved. I'm sure that some of you will know this, and I apologise if I'm sort of telling information that you already know, but I never know quite how to read the room. And you are quite a unique audience, let's be fair. So, and then I also want to touch on, you know, what's gone by. You've kind of heard about Andy's model of, you know, having a lot of business opportunities open to us. And then we have that big COVID thing going on that we need to just touch on as well. I want to talk to you about kind of where we are at the moment and how we've come through that, and also the things that we're facing going forwards. All of this, you know, it's been a really tough few years, but I'm really excited. We're in a really strong position, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about some of the stuff with you this evening. So, but that's going to be pretty, I'm going to be pretty vague about everything, because what I would much prefer is to open up the room and have some dialogue with you and answer the questions that you want to be answered, and the topics that you want to talk about. So I will whiz through, and then we can have some proper discussions about your thoughts. So as many of you know, Pulhams is a very old company. I think we're looking quite good on it, I'd say. We're doing all right. And I think we owe an awful lot to this man in the middle, William Pulham. And when the latest generation of Pulhams think about our family history, we often use this picture. And it's the first picture that certainly comes into our mind about when we talk about when the company was established. I think it was slightly before this particular photograph, but this is William Pulham. He began the business in 1880, and he was previously a baker, and we think that's where the link came with a parcel carrying service. We've done quite a lot of work over the last couple of years with somebody on our family history in terms of kind of when the family where the family goes back to, but this man is the kind of first person to move into the kind of transport sector. So this particular branch of the family can be traced back to the early 1600s in Coldaston, not far from here. For, you know, you I don't know whether you went there when you were travelling, when you came last time, but only 4 miles from here. And the earliest records of the family start with another William Pulham, funnily enough, in 1629. And he lived in Coldaston. And in those early days, the cart obviously would have carried parcels and small livestock from the villages into the nearest town, which at that time would have been Cheltenham. And the regular customers would be met at their farms and the cottages in order to pick up those parcels and take them in. And within about 5 years, there was a weekly service for this to do this, and that service is what we now know as the 801 service, which still continues to run, albeit with very poor margins, but it does continue to run to this day from Mortley Marsh through to Stow-on-the-Wold, Bourton-on-the-Water, some journeys to Northleach, and then into Andoversford and off to Cheltenham. Our local bus operation has grown dramatically in the last 10 years. A few additional services during COVID that we took on, which were absolutely essential for us, keep our staff going and claim less furlough. That was our main aim, to keep people busy and to keep as many people accessing bus services as possible. That was our main priorities. And now we have a good number of services. I think it's about 15 or 20 services now operating throughout Gloucestershire and Oxfordshire. Now, in 1927, Pulhams had been asked to provide a daily transport to a school bus, essentially, to the grammar school in North Leach. And of course, that was the time when the Chevrolets were purchased. And today, I mention that because today, home to school transport, which is what it's now known as, is an absolute essential golden thread of our organisation, and probably when we look at that being mainly local authority contractual work, but also a lot of, and this has been something that's really excelled in our business for the last few years, a lot of private home to school transport routes, which are a very good, reliable source of regular income. So I think we've got about over 50 routes. We've got 52 or something routes at the moment, and they operate every morning and every afternoon, obviously. And we did some calculations back this time last year, and it was about 3,500 children every morning and every afternoon. So we are moving a lot of young people. And then, of course, on top of this, we've got our local bus services. We will already probably have spoken to you guys about this. Local bus services are our usual private hire, and that also includes tours for adults with a number of tour agents, educational excursions and groups, tours away to mainly to Normandy and World War I and World War II sites with school travel agents. And then we have sort of branched out into a little bit of corporate coach hire, and we do an awful lot of weddings as well. So in the last 10 years, we've made a heavy investment into Euro 6, and in the last, we've probably spent in the region of about 15 million in 15, plus actually that figure is probably a little bit out of date now, but last 10 years about 50 million pounds investing in Euro 6. This more recently, we've obviously had this PSVAR challenge. Again, another something that you can ask me some questions about later if I can try and answer them. And that's probably in the region of somewhere between £250,000 and £500,000 to £300,000-ish on PSVAR conversions. That's not including coaches of additional asset value to purchase in the beginning already equipped with a wheelchair lift. So that's just conversions. This is a slide that I'm extremely proud of. We're obviously members of the Confederation of Passenger Transport. We're Guild of Coach Operator members. We've been Guild members for quite a few years now. Andy is now a director, and we play a very strong leading role in information sharing, assisting other Guild members. We continue to meet since COVID, obviously through COVID we were just meeting online, but we continue to meet now, have live meetings 4 times a year, and that is a really valuable and special opportunity to be able to information share, to benchmark against each other, and you know what, it is a little bit like therapy sometimes, because you can talk to people that are going through the same challenges as you, and we often find that we come away all feeling quite a lot better for the challenges that we're facing on a day-to-day basis. So in March 2020, we gained earned recognition status, DVSA earned recognition status, and that really demonstrates exemplary service across the industry. There's only, I think there's only about 17 or 18 coach operators, independent coach operators that are in earned recognition. And that scheme is kind of developing all the time, where I'm, as usual, as finger in every pie, I'm quite involved with DVSA and promoting the scheme to other guild members. It will become a guild standard shortly as well. So it is something that we all aim to achieve, and we were successful in that in March 2020, and therefore are coming up to another audit. And my standard on audit is that we are ready for audit every single day of the week. So if National Express or Guild or DVSA wanted to come in tomorrow afternoon, then there should never be a problem with that. We should be ready for audit every single day. And we are. So the earned recognition focuses mainly on, it does cover quality, it does cover how you manage your staff and your finances, but it's mainly focused on maintenance, compliance, driver's hours legislation. I wanted to just touch on this because I mentioned earlier about the private home to school transport routes, and these are just some of the clients that we work with on private home to school transport now. We are the preferred travel partners for Gloucestershire Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust and Gloucestershire Managed Services. We've been running the 99 service, would you believe, now for 5 years, and they have really wanted to extend that for a further 2, so they've just approved that. They've also approved that there will be there's actually a trial going on for extended hours at the moment, and they've just approved funding for that to be extended for a further period. And obviously we have a DVSA, that's a really old logo actually, a DVSA, I shouldn't say VESA anymore, a DVSA authorised testing facility on site. So our relationship with these kind of high-end clients demonstrates our reliability and our commitment to being the best possible operator that we can be. That doesn't mean to say we're perfect. We make mistakes every day, but it means that we're transparent and we can put things right, and we're able to demonstrate a good level of, an excellent level of compliance. So our relationship with the school started just over a year ago. 18 months ago, and they approached us as a partnership to provide their home to school transport, which is lots of areas, goes right out to Stroud and Nailsworth, and then the other end of the Cotswolds to Broadway, and then out here in the deepest, darkest depths of Bourton-on-the-Water and over to Moreton-in-Marsh. So there's a massive area there to cover, and we have an excellent relationship. And of course, on top of that, as always with these relationships, we benefit from a huge amount of in-between school private hire as well. We have also provided the client with an app solution for their parents to use, so the child can board they buy the product and they buy a QR code. And the QR code is scanned by the driver. The child has it on their phone or on their person, and they scan the QR code, and it informs the parent that the child has scanned onto the vehicle, and it shows them the tracking of the vehicle from its boarding point to the stop that they want to get off at. So the parent can see that journey, and they can therefore see any delays, any problems, and we can notify them on the app of any issues that we might be experiencing. So it's a really good product, and the schools are incredibly, and the parents are incredibly pleased with that. So at the moment, this is where we currently stand, and this is bang up to date because I took 2 vehicles off the licence yesterday and added 1. So despite Andy keeps saying to me, well, you know, we'll just get smaller. It doesn't seem to be happening. We've still got 92 vehicles on the licence with 117 staff. That is fluctuating staff-wise because, well, it's incredibly difficult to recruit at the moment. We do have a driver training academy. We set that up through 2021. It was painstaking to set up because DVSA are, in terms of training schools, they're very geared towards groups who have delegated examiners and plenty of training capacity. We are a good candidate to train people because we have time for them. We can give them good quality PSV training, and we can mould them to be good people who provide amazing customer service. And whilst I'm not saying that PLCs don't do that, there is something special when you are trained by an independent family business, and it literally is myself and my team that do that. So DVSA are not really geared up for that, and so it takes us an awful lot longer to get candidates through the process. Again, happy to take some questions on that if you would like to know a little bit more. We offer a staff benefits package, including lots of high street discounts, access to healthcare, physiotherapy, chiropractor, prepayment certificates for prescriptions, lots and lots of excellent benefits to our team. We're members of TBF, and we subsidise that as well, so that also gives them additional benefits. So on top of the current salary, we've just announced a salary increase, but on top of that there are lots of ways in which we can help our staff and make their money go that little bit further, particularly at this difficult time of increased cost of living. And I don't think we were very well established in our mental health programme when Andy spoke to you the last time, but we are now, and some of you may be aware that I presented to the CPT conference a couple of years ago about the mental health programme that we have for our staff, and it's you know, particularly since COVID, I think there was always a mental health issue. I would say probably 30% of our staff have a mental health issue, and I just don't think we knew about it before COVID. I think a lot of it has come out since then. I think it was still there. So with our trained mental health first aiders, we pay for counselling sessions, but as well as that, we give up our time to speak to people and always give them the opportunity to it might just be 10 minutes of, you know, I'm struggling at home, or I'm tired, or those conversations are really, really important. So I always think that life now, we sort of describe it as sort of pre-COVID, during COVID and post-COVID. There seem to be these kind of compartmentalised areas of the last few years, and it feels like we have lost quite a bit. Since 2019, we've had so many life and business changing experiences, and I think we both Andy and I continue to feel the effects of that, and maybe we all do. Maybe that's just the way it's going to be from now on. But there are negatives, but there are also quite a lot of positives that it's really important to mention. I'll give you an example. Staffing across the industry is a huge challenge. Whoever comes to present to you from a business is in this industry, and many sectors, will find exactly the same thing. We're all struggling for staff, and I suppose when I go to the if I go out for dinner with friends or something and the service is a bit slow, and I think, I know how you feel, it's okay, don't worry about it, we'll just have another glass of wine, it'll be fine. So we're perhaps a little bit more patient as well now. I think The plus side of that is that private hire rates and contract rates have increased dramatically, and that was a welcome change, and one which was most certainly required. I'm going to mention the B word, Brexit. Whatever your feelings about Brexit, as much as I want to be independent and I want to grow our own crops and I want to, be part of an independent country that can self-sustain, we are really, really missing our Eastern European colleagues in this industry. I always found them extremely hardworking. They were good with customers, and it's a huge loss to us. And we would very much welcome a return of those people. I'm not going to say too much more than that, but we do struggle we struggle with some staff when we really miss them. We really, really miss them. And another positive is that there is absolutely no shortage of work. We could literally fill our diary 3 times over some days. September, Andy and I were driving a lot of the time because we had clients that we work for regularly, and you don't want to let them down. We didn't let anybody down, but when they ask us for another coach and they'll say, oh, we forgot to book this one. And we've had to say no a lot of times because we haven't been able to fit any more work in our diary without, really causing us a problem. What we don't want to do is take on so much work that we end up being unreliable, and that's not in our nature to be like that. So we don't cancel, we don't let people down, but we have had, in order for that to be successful, we have had to turn away a lot of work. And I would say probably that's ongoing. I would say probably we've turned away 2/3 of the quotations that have come in over the last few months. So parts availability continues to be a little bit of a challenge. We've got several bits of equipment. Our Somas lifts are waiting for a part to come. So that is, we can't work without a set of lifts. So we've had to buy a brand new set. And things like that don't come very cheaply. But that's not unique to our industry. That's happening in all sorts of industries, parts availability. Vehicle availability also, second-hand value has gone up, and there is a shortage of second-hand vehicles. We've invested quite a lot of money upgrading our school fleet now and converting those to PSVAR. So we have been quite lucky. Some good investments we've made, and that has had quite a good impact on the fleet. A challenge for us is, as it will be for all anybody, any organisation that operates bus services, is bus investment really, and particularly the provision in rural communities. There is very, very little around here now that is, in terms of its provision for local people, for young people to access healthcare and education, for older people to access healthcare, surgeries, hospital appointments. It's really, really not good enough. And we've got this national agenda for, zero emission and climate change. But for me, that isn't about putting a cycle lane through the middle of London. It is very much about working together with bus operators and us as a coach operator to deliver those targets. And we do feel a little bit left out of the loop at the moment, because I just don't think there's enough priority given to us as bus operators. Fuel, I don't need to tell you that fuel is a huge challenge for us. We've seen fluctuating prices over the last 6 weeks, but certainly it has had a huge impact on our margins, and in many cases we have had to pass it on to the customer. Staff need more money, the contract rates are going up, you know, somebody's got to pay for that, unfortunately. So that is a challenge, and not least for the fact that we had an awful lot of it stolen, which you probably will have read about. But again, do ask me a question about that. We had two tank loads stolen, but we have sorted that problem now. We have a sniper on the roof now. I think it's important to recognise that coach and bus have slightly different challenges. You know, buses through COVID, bus was funded. So the CBSSG and latterly the BRG grant enabled the bus services to continue at a reasonable rate. We weren't allowed to make a profit. We weren't allowed to, we didn't want to lose anything. It was a no better, no worse situation, but at least it kept everybody employed and it kept everything running. Coach, however, was not funded. They are incredibly valuable vehicles. What you see on the screen is, you know, £250,000 worth of equipment, as well as the minibus at, you know, £80,000, £90,000. And all of a sudden, that's you've still got to pay those bills. You've still got that. In most cases, those are going to be financed to a certain degree. So the banks still want to be paid for that. And whilst many manufacturers and finance companies, they were understanding, that bill still has to be paid even now. So any delays on finance are still our obligation at the end of the day. So without any funding, that was an incredibly difficult time. And as Michael mentioned earlier, we did an awful lot of campaigning for that in various guises. What you saw on the news and all the social media about Honk for Hope was just one tiny part of what some people were doing, whereas you know, some of us were working at a more strategic level with government to try and put our case forward. And you know, we always felt that it would never be funded because it's a nice to have rather than an essential. Bus was always going to be funded over coach, and you know, to a certain degree, we you know, we can understand that. What's frustrating is that the homeschool transport coaches still needed to be there to pick up when we left off, when we came back to normal operation or some kind of normal operation. So that was quite a difficult challenge. We have electric vehicles. We've got low emission zone issues. We've got rural infrastructure for charging issues. There's an awful lot to come. What we are is, you know, a strong company that has come through this very difficult time, and I think that is our good business decisions over the last 142 years, as well as Andy's direction in the last 5-10 years, and we are now in a really strong and quite an exciting position now for moving forward to the next stage. Let me take your questions. I don't really want to say any more now. Let me open up the floor. Is there anything that I've said that you might like to explore a little further?
Well, thank you very much, Kathryn. If we do it by the way of raising hands, I mean, one thing that you sort of have made very clear through this is that Pulhams is a family firm, but it's not just a family, although your son is now driving the Pulhams, it's all 117 of your staff, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're at a size where you can know your 117 staff. You're able to sort of be part of their family in some ways, as you're saying. So it must. Yeah. So I'll ask a question to start with. It must have been very difficult when you came to COVID and having to sort of furlough these people and with the uncertainty that was attached to it. How many of your staff sort of did you end up having to furlough in the end?
Gosh, now you're taking me back. The main thing for us was we didn't want to make any redundancies, and we didn't. In fact, we were recruiting. during that time. So there were some people who said, I don't want to go on furlough. They wanted to work, so we made arrangements for that. There were some people who said the furlough rules were very complicated in the beginning because they had to go on a rolling rota. You know, that there was that we spent. I think we spent more time on blooming furlough than we did on anything else. So I think it was about certainly trying to satisfy each individual person. So some people wanted to go on furlough. Some people, they weren't allowed to just go on furlough. They had to take a role. Some people didn't want to be at home. They were struggling being at home all of that time. I think we probably lost some people that we were happy to lose. I think there's about 4 who we were quite happy to move on, and that was okay. There were some people who joined us who weren't entitled to furlough, although they were later on. Again, the rules changed, they constantly changed. I think in the end, everybody had a little bit of furlough in some form because the rules allowed us to you could work a certain number of hours, and then you could have furlough on what your average hours were for the previous reference period, and based on the year before what you were doing at that time as well, depending on where your salary was at that time. We're weekly paid and it's hourly paid, so we had an awful lot of calculation to do. Everybody had a little bit of bite of the cherry, and also they all did a little bit of work, so it was very shared, but our main priority was looking after them and making sure that nobody lost their jobs. And in fact they were pretty well off. They did well.
And was that sort of reflected by the larger operators obviously have lost quite a lot of staff when they came out of furlough, but you're obviously journeying with them through furlough. So did you actually not see the great exodus that others saw when furlough was released and that?
No, like I say, I think we only lost about 4, and that wasn't, one of those has actually come back now. He just was uncertain about whether furlough was going to give him enough, and he just wanted to feed his family, 4 children, and he said, look, I'm going to go work for UPS, and then I'll see you in a few years. And funny enough, he came back a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah, that sounds a good story compared with what's happening around a lot of the other places in the industry. Now I can't believe I haven't got any hands up anywhere.
Oh my life.
Am I missing
Richard, come on, you ask a question.
Yeah, Kathryn, good evening. Lovely to talk to you again, and particularly to hear you sing the praises of the Guild of British Coach Operators, which I was the administrator for until I retired about 3 years ago. But actually, I wanted to ask you a bit about buses and local bus services, because yesterday the government came out finally with details or outline details of this £2 fare cap that they want to put the industry to implement for January, February, March next year. I've read it a couple of times. I'm still not sure I understand it, and it seems absolutely usual Department for Transport overcomplicating things, making it overly bureaucratic. But what's your thoughts on this? Do you think this is a scheme that's actually going to work and attract people onto buses, or is it just going to be a flash in the pan? We'll give people cheap fares for 3 months. It won't generate lots of new traffic. And then when we put the fares back up to the normal level, everybody's going to be screaming at us for saying you shouldn't have done that.
I don't want to be, I'm a really positive person, Richard. I like to see the best in everybody, and I like to see that a scheme, we can talk about the DRT if you like in a minute. I'd like to see a scheme be successful. So I like to give everything a good go. I was on a call with CPT, and I can't remember what the call was. I go on so many calls. I was on a call with them a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And one of the things I mentioned was, can we make this, CBSSG was just so onerous for an SME. especially an SME that has a set of accounts that doesn't just include bus. You know, how do you allocate your garage staff to some, you know, some bus and some coach? How do you allocate your, you know, the payment of your lifts, or, you know, whatever it was, your ticket machines are, you know, it's so difficult to try and address everything that they want to demonstrate that they're giving money to the right thing in the right way. So my concern with the £2 fare cap, and I raised this with them, is can we just have a little bit of common sense with SMEs? Because if you are going to tell me that I've got to give you paperwork and evidence in the reams to be able to be involved in this scheme, then I don't think we're in. This pretty much comes down to the reimbursement strategy, though. I think if we haven't made a decision yet whether we're going to be included or not, and if we're not, it leaves us in a really difficult position when it comes to the other local operators. Our you know, the main operator in Cheltenham is Stagecoach. You know, Stagecoach will no doubt be part of the £2 fare cap. Shelte's smiling. No doubt, you know, they're a group, they're going to be part of a £2 fare cap. So where does that leave us when we're running the P&Q? You can't buy a £2 fare. I mean, they're mainly old people, so that's probably not going to make too much difference. But, you know, my point is, you know, where do you sit with, you know, against a group when you're operating over similar ground? I don't want to be saying to passengers, well, you board that bus, you get £2 fare, but if you board my bus, you'll pay £3.50. And I think that's putting us in a really awkward position. Now, the paperwork from we have done quite a bit of data collection for it in order to be ready, so that we can submit some data. They will tell us what the reimbursement is going to be, and then we can make a decision. So we've done a little bit of work on that. However, the actual, funny enough, the information came through last week, and I took last week off to do some decorating at home, because I literally haven't had a day off for weeks. And I run a charity as well, as you know, so I was kind of busy all the time, so I haven't actually read the specific details yet. So you probably would be able to tell me more about it than I can tell you. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I think you raised that very important issue of what happens if one operator says they're in and another one says they're not. What the DFT put out yesterday has some suggestion that there'll be a lesser amount of data for SMEs, but it's not clear how much less. And they're asking for things like benchmarking data on ticket sales and revenue for every month back in 2019. Now, I was talking to two operators that I worked with yesterday. Both of them have changed their ticketing suppliers since then and no longer have access to the data, because once you no longer pay a license fee, I may have a lot of module data sitting on my hard disk, but you can't actually access it. And one is the system that's been turned off completely. And I think they are simply going to find that they cannot satisfy DFT even if they want to be in. Although their view is perhaps they don't want to be in. And indeed, one of the MD of one of them said to me last night, said, I think it's almost being set up to fail. And you can see the headline, can't you, later, when governments say, well, it was all the fault of those nasty bus companies that wouldn't offer £2 fares. Nothing to do with us, Gov. Not we made it so complicated that people couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But then I'm, you know, as you know, I'm from the glass half empty school, so I look at it slightly differently. But I think it's just a nightmare. And to issue papers on Monday and say you've got until Friday to decide whether you want to register interest, it's just ludicrous. Yeah, they've known it's been coming for months, so they take ages to do it, and then you've got to jump, you know, very quickly.
Yeah, well, the lead time is too short. I mean, they're starting in January, I think, aren't they? So yeah, the lead time is far too short. And on top of that, you know, Nottingham, I was on the same call, Nottingham City Transport were quite rightly saying, because I was saying, you know, 3 months is surely not long enough time to be able to get passengers on the bus anywhere, and that's a really difficult time of year because nobody wants to go in January anyway. It feels like it lasts 500 days as it is, doesn't it, January? So is it the right time of year? Is it going to work? Are there not better strategies for young people, for example, that would work better? And actually, Nottingham City said, I don't want it to be a long period, because actually what we need to do is get back to a normal fare. And I think that's a really important point, because aren't we just basically saying that, because it's not going to be a full reimbursement, it's not going to be a true reflection of our costs and our profit, and is it right at all? I don't know.
No.
There's
Okay, no, thank you for your comments. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Pal, I'm muted now. I've got a question. How many buses and coaches are there in the fleet?
There's 92, and I think there's 24 buses.
What buses you got? What types?
So they're mainly Volvo, with different bodies. In terms of buses, we have 4 Citaros. Do we have 4? No, we have 5. We have 5 Mercedes Citaros. We recently invested in the RLE MCV Evora.
Oh, I love those.
And yeah, we're getting on really, really well with that. And also the ADL product, which has been running on quite a few services. And again, a Volvo product. We're heavily into Volvo. So in terms of bus, that's pretty much some Optare, Cummins engine Optare Solos as well.
Yay, I love the Solos.
Thanks very much.
They've done well. They've done really well. I used one on school not that long ago, and it was a 2006, late 2006, and around the country lanes, it's the only thing we can get down there because it's so tight around the bends. And wow, she goes really well.
Thank you, Louise. Sholto, are you there? Your lips are moving, but we can't hear you at the moment.
I think your microphone might not be working, but you could type it in the chat if you...
We haven't heard you, Sholto. If you want to type it in the chat. Brendan.
Hello, Kathryn. I see that the coach that's about to run you over is on a rail replacement service. I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about how rail replacement works. I mean, is there a list of available jobs somewhere and you have to put in bids, or do the railway companies contact you directly? How does that go about?
So generally what happens is rail companies use a third party to, sometimes that's internally and sometimes it's externally, to organise their rail replacement services. And a lot of that is done in advance. So it's planned work. And we have the chance to put in bids for it, which heavily over the last, more so the 18 months, 2 years. And there are also opportunities for last minute emergency replacement work as well. That can sometimes work for us, and sometimes it can be a bit challenging because we're already pretty booked up. I mean, every day we are getting emails from all over the UK from all sorts of different groups asking for rail replacement services. We have been successful because we have a very high proportion of PSVAR coaches now. And also we have some buses with a tachograph in. A couple of the Citaros, we put a tachograph in so that we could use them on rail replacement work.
Awesome, thank you.
Richard Kemble.
Yes, Kathryn. I gather that Gloucestershire County Council have recently introduced a demand responsive service in the North Cotswold called the Robin. is Pulhams involved in this, or has it been done in-house?
No, I'm really excited you asked that question, because I know a lot about this, because I generally lead on the launch project. So whatever new business opportunity there is, I tend to get involved at the very beginning stage and make sure everything's set up, and then hopefully it kind of runs itself if I've done my job properly. So I'm very good at that. So yeah, I was involved. I wasn't involved at the very beginning, and I'll tell you the reason why, because Gloucestershire County Council, and Sholto's going to laugh at this as well because he knows how this feels. So Gloucestershire County Council basically wanted a demand responsive transport trial for 2 years, and they wanted to have 2 minibuses, and they had a pot of money. And when it went out for tender, we put what happened? We put a price in, but we didn't know what the pot of money was, but we obviously put a price in, and they all went, oh dear, we haven't got quite enough money for that. What can you do? And we said, well, we can do half. So that's why there's only one operating at the moment. So there was a Forest, I knew you'd understand. There was a Forest of Dean trial, and there is a North Cotswolds trial. And the North Cotswolds trial was awarded to us, and the Forest of Dean trial was eventually awarded to Lydney Dial-A-Ride. So the vehicles are owned by Gloucestershire County Council, but they are maintained by us. So they're on our licence, and they're liveried, as you may have seen them now, they're liveried in Robin livery as well. So there's nothing about Pulhams on them, so people don't know that it's us, although quite a lot of local people are really happy that it's us, because they're reassured that it will do what it's supposed to do.
So do Pulhams look after the bookings?
So the bookings are managed 3 ways. A call centre based in Leicester, I want to say, or not, is it Nottingham?
I think it's Lincolnshire.
Lincolnshire, you're probably right, Michael. Yeah. Thank you. So a call centre, you can do it online as well. And what happens is you can book your transport. This is all technology based, really, this DLT. So there's an algorithm that sits in the background which computes the boarding point, the alighting point, the mileage, the time required, whether there are any other bookings. It also computes the current bus services that operate over that same area. So I could say, well, I would like to go from Stow-on-the-Wold to Bourton-on-the-Water at this time. And it won't allow you to do that because the 801 runs over that same ground. So it automatically knows that. Now, if there was a service, I'm trying to think of something, but if there was a service that wasn't frequent, and you just caught it at the right time online, you would be able to use the DRT to run over the same ground, because there has to be a certain time period before you're allowed to book from the previous or the next bus. So the intention is for it not to compete, and we wouldn't engage in this anyway, with a commercial or subsidised service.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Thank you.
All you need now, I suspect, is the passengers.
Well, exactly. We need some passengers. We carried one, and that was my daughter.
So we really need an Omnibus Society out into the Cotswolds one Saturday.
We
keep
do.
you very busy.
Yeah, we do. But you're going to have to plan that. You're going to have to go. Well, the best thing you can do you know what? This is, Andy and I have said, this is a pub crawl. It's got a pub crawl. It's got, honestly, it really, really is. Because there are some really great pubs. We've got the Plough at Coldaston. We've got the Fox at Barrington. There are no bus routes between these places. So we absolutely are going to, one day when we're quiet, we're going to have a test it with a pub crawl.
I can vouch for that being an excellent idea. In Wiltshire, back 20 years ago, they had the Wiggly bus. And a friend and I had a wonderful day out from Devizes, touring all the villages, doing exactly what you said. you had an hour in the pub, and then the next bus came along and picked you up. You just rang up and booked it. It was a treat.
Yeah, I think the real shame is that it hasn't been advertised properly yet. So they were pushing and pushing and pushing for the launch, but they've got no comms. I asked for comms in August and they still didn't send me any. I still don't have any to this day, which is a real shame because we have our own social media platform that we could be promoting it, but I'm not allowed to say anything because it has to be approved by Gloucestershire County Council. So I'm not really good enough for that, apparently. So, you know, that's their loss, unfortunately. They're not making the best of it. But it is a real shame because I think although it sort of naturally lends itself to being a service for older people to go and do their shopping and perhaps in the long term replace those 1 day a week services, actually I've got a real passion for, as you know, I work with young people in my own mental health charity, and I think this is a huge lifeline for young people out in the Cotswolds here. I think they could access healthcare, they could access education, leisure activities, socialising. It's got many pro-social benefits to it, and that needs to be promoted out here.
Excellent. One slightly specific question, but there's obviously a backstory to. You did run the 855 from Cirencester to Northleach, but that sort of disappeared in June when it was taken over by Stagecoach, for you to reappear in September, when I think Stagecoach realised they didn't quite have the resources for it. Did you actually hand it back, or was it real retendering?
It was retendered. It would come to the end of its term, and we did retender for it, and I think the difference was around £9 a day. So Stagecoach won the tender. And I think it was a really challenging time this summer. You know, I've got my own issues with them as an organisation, and you know, various things that they do. However, we're all struggling with staff. It is a challenge. The difference between us and a PLC in most cases is because we are here. I'm driving a school bus tomorrow afternoon because someone has gone off sick, so we're starting to use up our spare capacity, and that's just the way a family business works. We get out of bed in the morning and we go do it, whereas PLCs don't tend to work like that. They've probably got some people in the office, but they need those people in the office, and it doesn't have quite the same impact that it would do for us. So yeah, so I think it was they did bite off a little bit more than they could chew on that one, and that led to some challenges. And instead of collaborating with us, they work against us all the time. And I like to work together for a good outcome, but that's not their aim.
Yes, I say it's been interesting because you had said about contract prices post-COVID being sort of more than they were previously. Has that really filtered through to the council? Yes,
from our point of view, it has. We've certainly, what was happening is we were finding that, rates of pay and fuel prices were increasing faster than we could cope with it. So it was very much a case of we either have to give notice on this contract, or you need to be realistic and start putting some more money into the pot. And that caused us to give notice on quite a few contracts. And unfortunately, instead of agreeing a rate, the contract price was significantly higher because they didn't make those initial. I mean, Oxfordshire County Council had a measly 3% on the table back last March.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because we pushed it. And I'm sorry, we gave an 8% pay rise to our staff in April, and we gave a further 5% today.
Yeah. I mean, that's the issue of making sure that councils are realistic in what they're looking for. I mean, I suspect we'll be at the stage where things will be cut because they will not have the money to fund what is needed moving forward. But that's
definitely the case now, and I think there is a huge lack of provision for home to school transport as well.
Sholto has announced he's been retired from the industry now for 11 years, but he takes his hat off to those who still work within it. His question was, what's the split from part-time, full-time drivers? And have you been able to retain engineering staff?
So in terms of the part and full-time, actually years ago we used to have a lot more, and I suspect this is where your question's going, a lot more part-time drivers, those that did just schools and those that were perhaps older people who still had their license and still had a lot of extremely valuable experience that they could bring to the industry. So we have a lot less of those now. And I think we're finding more recently that, you know, even school bus drivers want to earn a good wage, and rightly so. They're carrying, you know, very valuable cargo, not carrying a bunch of bananas up to, you know, from north to south or south to north or wherever. So it is about rewarding those people. And actually the difference between a school bus driver weekly pay, albeit in term time, is not that greater difference between full and part-time. In terms of engineering staff, actually, we've been really successful with engineering staff. We recruited just before COVID, and we made the decision quite a few years ago that we were going to invest in some new young blood, not necessarily young in age, but certainly in terms of their commitment and their attitude towards working in a family business. So we recruited quite a number of apprentices from the local schools. So we have hang on, where are we? We have one finished last year, one finishing this year, and then we have 3 further ones going through at the moment. 4 actually. So we're doing well on engineering stuff, and we have a lady engineer just joined us as an apprentice, which is fantastic. Good to see some women in the industry.
I'm looking around for any other hands for Kathryn.
A pub crawl sounds like a good idea, yeah. My charity is called Headspace, and it's not Headspace as in, I will share my screen with you. Can you see that? This is my charity here. It's called Headspace. It's a youth mental health charity, and it's based here in Bourton-on-the-Water. And we provide counselling and wellbeing services to young people 11 to 19.
Excellent. You've actually prompted 2 more hands to come up now, Kathryn. Peter Heath.
Kathryn, I mean, in terms of your bus network, which is in a sort of largely rural area, what are patronage levels like now compared to pre-COVID?
They're looking better. We're not back to normal yet. We're still around the 80% mark, and some services are a little bit lower than that. The 99 service is not positive. That's still at just over 50%, 60% nearly, because and the reason for that is because the trust don't want to take a decision on staff car parking. They gave this free parking. They had a strategy for removing permits and pushing people onto the bus, which was all part of the 99 service contract at that time. And then COVID hit, and they felt that they should give the staff free parking to get into work. So that encouraged people to use their cars again, and they're really struggling to get that back. And they're still in a situation where the staff are still driving in and using free car parking, and that needs to stop. But I mean, I've made it very clear, it's your loss, because it's the revenue could be an awful lot higher, but you know, you have to manage that internally.
Way in which society has changed sort of after COVID, I mean, do you think that your rural bus network, the patronage will ever get back to normal, or has there been a sort of a step change downwards, unfortunately?
I'm afraid there has. I don't think that it's going to come back to normal, and not without significant investment. And the thing is, it was already struggling before COVID. COVID has just exacerbated the entire situation. The 801 service runs between, and it's a chicken and egg, isn't it? If you're a bus operator, you know, a PLC will probably, try to take some risks with it as well. But as a family independent, our bottom line is important, and we need to be able to, show profits and reinvest in the fleet, etc. So I think it's really easy to say, well, the 801 service is a 90-minute service at the moment. Wouldn't it be great if that was a 30-minute service? But that's a chicken and egg situation, because until we know that we've got those passengers, you don't really want to make that kind of investment. But until you make that investment, we can't. How are people going to know that they can travel and have a reliable, regular service that gets them to where they need to be? And that does require local authority investment.
Thanks, Kathryn.
Richard Delahoy, you've still got a hand up. Is that a second question?
Yeah, if you'll allow me, Kathryn, on the coach side, having been committed Volvo users, what was behind the decision to try Irizar, and what's been your experience with the Irizars?
So we've had experiences with a number of manufacturers. And without a doubt, Volvo are an incredibly good product. And most importantly, the after service and parts availability. We have 2 deliveries a day for parts. And that level of service for us is what keeps us in a reliable position for our customers. So moving to, we had a couple of issues with Volvo a few years ago, and that sort of prompted us to start looking at some other projects, which is where in 2014 we invested in the first Euro 6 Mercedes. And then we've got on very well with all of those, both those products. Buying the Irizar was more about just trialing something else. We went to the factory, we saw the product, we experienced it ourselves. We were really happy with some of the things that they did, their mechanisms for working, the interior of that Irizar is absolutely stunning, and we were really, really impressed. So we made the decision. That was a new product to us, and we are always reluctant to bring in things that are a little bit odd, because you don't necessarily want to keep panels for everything in stock, and parts for things. But they promised us, again, it comes down to after sales, and they promised us that they would be able to deliver, which then prompted, obviously, additional purchases.
Excellent, thank you.
Now, I can't see any other hands, not even for a second question. So, Kathryn, I think we can say thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. I think it's been fascinating to hear from a small family firm with 117 vehicles, 117 staff and 90 vehicles, wasn't it? It's,
yeah.
I mean, I've always had a lot of time for your operations in the Cotswolds. I think most of the people on here will have experienced them and been impressed with the standards you've actually managed to maintain all the time. And I think we all would wish you well for the future with this. And it's really reassuring to see your son there. You're putting him out to work already. So that could be, is it the 6th generation of Pulhams who will be involved in the firm?
He's the 5th.
5th, yeah. So I think, it's interesting looking around the industry that companies are disappearing. And a lot of that is because the younger generation doesn't want to take it on and doesn't really see a future for it. I remember when Andy was talking and the circumstances when he found himself taking it over, it was a do we do this at that time because, you know, the circumstances they were, and you decided that you were going to keep it going and try and build it on. I think all credit to you and what you've managed to achieve here. So I'm not quite sure how we do the round of applause on Zoom, other than if everyone unmutes themselves and gives you a clap. But thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. And Peter Heath's hand has just shot up, if that is deliberate.
I think he's waving.
That's the way you clap on Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just one other notice for those who are on here, and the next meeting of the South Western Wales branch, well, it is the 21st of December. It's a quiz in Penarth in Cardiff, but I suspect, knowing the geographical location of most of you, the next one that may be of interest to our Zoom audience is the 25th of January for a presentation called When Dennis Went West. Now, some of you may have known the late Mike Stevens, who took a number of cine films, which one of which has been restored, and it featured a trip 50 years ago from Aldershot in the Dennis Low Line all the way down to Land's End and back. He went by the presidential weekend in Bristol, and as you can imagine, 50 years ago, a lot has changed since then. So we thought it'd be really interesting to show it. And also, if anyone, and I noticed Derek Person sitting there, he's one of them, remembers or went on that trip, we'd love to have more background about it so that we can actually do Mike's film justice and do a record of what he has recorded on there. So if you want to make a note of that, it's the 25th of January, 7:30, I think we've got that down for. That will be a presentation via Zoom. But as for tonight, thank you very much for your time, Kathryn. I'm a bit worried about that bus. It must have broken down there because it hasn't moved yet.
That's the problem. That is the problem with having a DAF. That's a DAF engine in that. No, we need to go and have a chat about this with Irizar, don't we? I'll go and catch it now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers.